All right, guys. The name of this message is going to be called Funny Money. Funny Money. This message is going to be about money. And it's going to be about paying tithes, looking into finances, your money, and paying your tithes. And this isn't going to be a message where I'm just beating you over the head about paying your tithes at church. This message mainly is, first off, I'm going to answer a question that people ask about tithes. But after that, this message is really just me sharing with you what I've been going through this past week, what's been playing out in my mind, and what I believe God is showing me, and what God has been trying to get me to see about my finances and me paying my tithes, how He feels about what I'm doing with that. And I believe that what He's been showing me this past week will help somebody out there, will be a blessing to somebody out there, whether you need better understanding of how God feels about you and your finances, and whether or not you do or don't pay tithes, and how much you pay, this, that, or the other. I think this message will help you out some. It'll give you a better understanding of everything. And so I just want to jump right into this message, Funny Money. A question that a lot of people ask a lot of times is, why do we still today pay tithes? And the reason why they ask why do we still pay it is because they'll say, well, I feel like that's Old Testament law. It's old law, the law of Moses, and it just seems like if Jesus is the new covenant, why is it that we're still paying tithes if we stepped into something new? Well, I think I've got a couple of spots here in the Bible that'll kind of help you have an answer for that. The first thing that I need to point out here, and go ahead and go to Genesis, first book of the Bible. I've got a couple of spots for us to look at. But let me just say this, for those that look at tithing as only something of the law of Moses, here's the thing. Yes, God gave Moses laws for the Israelites to follow. But remember, Moses didn't come into the picture until the second book of the Bible, Exodus. So let's look at what happens before that in Genesis. Here in chapter 4, at the start, I believe this story, this simple story that we see, is probably one of the first examples the Bible gives us of tithes, if you think about it. And let me say this, you may say, well, what do you mean? You know, we go to church, we give money in the collection plate, we do that. But it's more than just about some money, really. It's about giving. It's about obedience to God and giving to God. Really, it's giving back, because what you're doing is you're giving what's already due to Him. You're giving Him what's already His. If you're somebody who you've testified about God giving you the job that you have, or giving you a promotion at your job, this, that, or the other, really the money you make is His. The position and the title you have is His. It was His before it was yours. It belongs to Him. So if you feel so privileged that you got to testify, well, look at it this way. When you give just a little bit of that income to the church, really you shouldn't look at it so much as giving it to people. You're giving it to God. You're giving to Him some of what He's really given to you, if you think about it. And what I mean by that is this: yes, the money goes for the building, the church building, but you got to step back and look at the bigger picture. First off, it benefits you because you're helping this church that you go to, that your friends and your family may go to. You're paying so that the building can be paid off, the building note or the rent, and having the lights on and having those nice comfy pews that you sit in. It's got to be paid for. But also, it's not just for you, it's for God, because when you help keep your church open by paying your tithes, you keep that door open for someone else to come in. And you might think, well, what's the big deal about a stranger? But some of you, as I'm sure you know, that is a big deal. You should be excited when strangers come into your church. You should be welcoming to them, because even if you don't know them, even if you're not necessarily crazy about the person, maybe you don't like the person, maybe you and that new person have had run-ins in the past, when you walk into those church doors, that should be null and void for that time you're in that church. All the drama, all the bull crap, all the nonsense that you had going on outside of the church, when you walk into the church, all that should still be left out there in the world. So any issues you have with somebody, listen, just let it go, because they need Jesus just like you do. And just because you may have issues with them, even if they're the ones that did you wrong and not you did them wrong, they still deserve the chance to hear the word of God. So if they're coming in that church not bothering you, just going and minding their business, sitting somewhere so that they can hear that word, let them hear that word. So when you do what you can, and you play your part and pay your part, I guess you could say, with your tithes, you're helping keeping that church open, not only for you and your loved ones, but for newcomers, for backsliders, for people who are just now getting to know God, or maybe people who have been shunned at past churches and maybe they're looking for a new welcoming church. Whatever the reason may be, really is irrelevant. The point is, it's important to keep as many churches open as possible. We need them everywhere. That way people can have less of an excuse as to why they didn't go to church. Oh, well, there's just not one close to me. Well, if we keep these churches open, then yeah, everybody's got, a church or two somewhere that they can get to without having to go on and on and on about not having one nearby and using that as an excuse not to go. So it's important. And so when you have these open doors that you help keep open to bring in God's lost sheep, it's giving back to God. It's like saying, okay, I was once lost, I'm found now, but God, let me help bring more lost in. I don't want to just be content and say, well, I've arrived and I've made it and I'm good, so I'm just going to get comfortable. No, that's not how it works. We're supposed to be fishers of men, right? So we should want more people being brought in. What a great way to bless God. And so you should look at it that way. But let's look at this here in Genesis chapter 4, starting at the beginning. It says this: And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. You got two brothers, Cain and Abel. Cain was the one that tilled the ground. Abel did something else. He tended the sheep. So they both had a job, and they both got something out of the work that they did, kind of like how we get money for the work that we do. Now let's look at this, verse 3. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So we see one of the brothers, his job is to till the ground. He's sowing, basically. He's put in some work, some effort, and in return, he can get some fruit. And then you have the other brother, he tends to the sheep, and so sheep, they're going to reproduce. So that's what he's getting out of it. Kind of like how we get money, our wages for our work. And so just like how when it comes to paying tithes, we're supposed to give some of the first of what we've made back to God, Cain and Abel are supposed to get some of the first of what they've made from their work back to God. One of the brothers right away gives of what he has, but you have another brother that does it after a period of time. In other words, he doesn't seem to quite take it as serious as the brother that just strolled right on in and gave of the first bit of what he had gained. And so God was happy with one, but not so happy with the other. And so that's kind of how it is today with us with our tithes. If you think about it, that's a great story to kind of look into to help make the point of how tithing works. It wasn't necessarily about one giving more than the other. It was about the heart and the mindset that they went into it with. One of them taking it serious, one of them just having this, oh, whatever, I'll get around to it whenever kind of attitude. And so you may say, well, I kind of get where you're going with that, but you don't actually see the word tithe there. So I don't know if I can consider that a story of tithing. Well, let's move from this chapter 4, to chapter 14. And we'll start at verse 8. It says, and Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abraham of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. So there you go. There's something else for you. You see tithes early in Genesis, way before we see Moses in Exodus. So there you go. Now that I've kind of gone over that and explained that, go with me. Let's see here. Where do I want to go? Go with me to Malachi, chapter 3. We'll start here at verse 8. It says this, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, saith the Lord of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for ye shall be a delightsome land, saith the Lord of hosts. So this is verse 8, the start of what I just read here. Is very popular with a lot of preachers. When they want to explain to their congregation the importance of tithing, they'll say, okay, you can look at it this way. If you refuse to pay your tithes, you're basically robbing God. Why would you want to do that? And so after that, we see where it's talking about when you don't make those offerings, it's like you're cursed with a curse. And he goes on to say, however, when you do what you're supposed to do, you will be blessed. I'll open up the windows of heaven and bless you. I will rebuke the devourer. I'm going to protect you and your fruit. You're gonna be good. You're blessed when you give back to me. When you're stingy and you just want to take, but you don't want to give back and do your part, it's like you're cursing yourself. It's like you're setting up yourself to just try to do it on your own, because it's like you're trying to tie God's hands up and say, oh no, God, I got this. Let me deal with the finances how I want to and how I see fit. Even though it's thanks to you, I have this job. Even though it's thanks to you, I have this income. Even though it's thanks to you, I have this position. Thanks to you, I have these benefits, so on and so forth. Now, when I first really started getting into church and staying into church, it was some years back, and this verse 8 here, this was something that I had heard a lot preached on. and mentioned in many different sermons and things like that. And for a lot of people, they can sound a little scary to them, thinking, okay, well, if I'm not paying my tithes and I'm robbing God, it's like there's a curse on me or something. But that's not really the thing that really grabbed me to make me want to pay tithes. Because sure enough, when I started getting into church, I was kind of curious about the whole point of paying tithes. I was like, I'm doing this, but I don't quite understand why. And, I don't understand why God needs money. He's, invisible. He can't really use our money. I'm not sure I understand how this works. Because I was still trying to figure it out. But the thing that got me was simply the fact that he's saying, when you do this, I'm making sure you're blessed. I'm making sure you're taken care of. It's like saying, hey, God, go out of your way to protect me and watch over me. Help me with any of my financial situations, any issues I have financially, because I have given back to you. So since I'm giving back to you, have my back. You know what I mean? And so I'm thinking, okay, I really want to test this out because it sounds very much like he's saying, step out on faith, believe in me. You do this, I got you. I got your back. You're going to be blessed. It's simple. You give a little to me and I can bless you a lot. You don't want to give back to me what's actually due to me, what's actually really mine, and you're just going to hurt yourself. And I'm thinking, okay, simple enough. I want to test this out. I'm going to try this out. Because he wants me to try him out on this. I'm like, okay. So I start getting more serious about paying tithes. Helping out financially with the church, giving whatever it seemed like I could. And it seemed like the more I trusted God with my finances, I started noticing these things happen. And I even testified about it before the church this one time. For example, I had paid my tithes and I was low on cash. It was close to payday, but not quite there yet. And I didn't really have much money to eat on much. And I remember sitting there in the break room at work, and somebody had just bought these chips. And it was a guy that I didn't really talk to. We weren't really friends. I just only saw him at work. And he was in there in the break room, and he was talking to somebody, and he had just bought these chips. And the particular chips he had at the time was like my favorite chips at that time. And so I'm sitting way, up against the wall, and I see him standing there, and he's eating a few of the chips, and he doesn't notice me even looking or eyeing those chips, because I'm really eyeing that bag of chips, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it just looks so delicious. But then I'm like, okay, let me go back to, looking at my phone or whatever, because I don't want anybody seeing me staring at these chips. That's just rude. Staring at somebody eating. And so, anyway, like I said, he's standing there, he's eating a few chips, he's talking to his buddy. And then he's just like, man, I'm full. I don't want any more of these. So he kind of looks around, and there's not very many people in the break room at the time. It's like me, him, and his buddy he's talking to. And he looks over me, and he's like, hey, you want the rest of these? And I was just like, okay, sure. And he was just like, man, I don't even know why I bought those. I was hungry a moment ago, but now, after eating just a few of them, I'm already full. I don't even know why I bought those. And just walked out of the room. Stuff like that would just happen. Or I would be at Pizza Hut just sitting there eating, low on cash, but just craving me some pizza so bad. So I'm like, I'll spend a little bit on this pizza because I'm really craving pizza. And I'd be sitting there, and I wouldn't even notice who's sitting at the table in front of me because I'd be so focused on getting something to eat. And then later on, one of the waitresses would come up and be like, hey, you don't have to pay. The people that were sitting at the table in front of you paid for you. I don't even remember somebody even sitting there, but evidently somebody them paid it, and didn't expect a thank you, didn't expect to be noticed. They just did it, I guess, out of the kindness of their heart. God just put it on their heart to do it. But just little things like that happened. And it seemed like the more I acknowledged those things and the more I thanked God and gave him the credit for it and testified about it, it just seemed like it just kept happening. It just seemed like God was just showing up and showing out in all these little ways that were actually big things to me, because it doesn't take much to make me happy. I'm one of these people running around playing Pokemon Go, catching imaginary little pocket monsters, so it don't take much to, make me happy, really. But it just little stuff like that. Well, I thought I was just, legit, I was just too legit to quit just because, God was doing little stuff like, making sure I'm fed, and it was funny, and it just really tripped me out. But it just seemed like the more I trusted him with finances and helped out financially any way that I could with just the church, with guest speakers, a prophet coming through, an evangelist coming through, whatever I could do, if we were gonna do a big cleanup in the church, or if we needed some tools and we had to pay for the tools to work on something, or to repaint something, or to fix something. I didn't mind if I had the money. I didn't mind putting money that I could have spent on just, a video game or something. I didn't mind spending that on helping out. I was definitely big on helping financially the best that I could. And it just seemed like God would always do something to kind of help me bounce back. And it was just like I just kept trusting in him more and more. And so that was really cool. And so I was always cheerful about giving tithes. But here's the thing. This is what has happened more recently. In more recent times, I've been big on paying my tithes. But the thing about it is, what I've recently realized is I've been a little, almost kind of religious with it. And getting religious is a pet peeve of mine. I try to be more about being spiritual and being more about the relationship with God than being religious and being all, about, being holier than thou and being all ritualistic and how everything's got to be just perfect and this and that. I'm more about the relationship. But in this one particular area, it's like God has used this current situation that I'm in to kind of wake me up to the fact that I'm being stiff and religious with my tithes, which is so far from where I once was. Because at the start, I was all about stepping out on faith and being happy and being that cheerful giver, and I was just excited. And it's not necessarily that I'm mad about tithing now or that I don't want to. It's just that now the excitement hasn't really been there for me because I've been stressing about it. You see, the thing that I was always explained was that tithe, one way of looking at the word tithe could be tenth, because it was expected to give, you were expected to give 10% of the income. That's how it was. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll make sure I always give at least 10% of whatever I get out of my check. And, sometimes I can give more than that if possible. And so, I was always set on, okay, I got to do this, I got to do this. And it was almost as if it became more of like a chore, or, more of making sure it gets done, and being so stiff about it, more so than the happiness and the joyfulness in doing that. And so it's been like that for a while. And so what has recently happened, which you all know what's been going on with me if you've been keeping up with me, whether it be on these sermons or on Facebook. Of course, I, got this car, and along with the car comes paying insurance, paying off the car itself, had to pay for the license plate, having to pay, this and that and the other. And then there were some parts that I had to pay for to kind of fix the doors, and, and it's just been hitting me all back to back. And now with this check, because it's like one check, it pretty much all goes to some bills, and then the other check is for, just my food and personal items and whatever else I really want to buy. Well, this check that I just got is supposed to be the check for doing whatever I want to do, but the majority of it is going to paying the rest of the car off. And so, it just seems like I dig out of the hole a little bit, get out of that financial rut, and then it just seems like I just kind of dip back down in just a little bit. But it's been interesting, and I'm learning all these things, getting all these experiences and everything, and really budgeting money more than what I was. And so here recently, like I said here recently, it's like I've been stressing about these tithes lately. And this past week, or all this week so far, I've just been thinking about how, well, when this Sunday comes up and the next one comes up, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay what I would usually pay because the money is just so tight right now. I'm not where I would usually be right now. Da, 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 da. I'm going on in my head about this money. And like I said, it's not that I'm mad about paying it or that I don't want to pay it. I do, but like I said, instead of being joyful and instead of it being from the heart, I'm being religious with it and saying, well, it's got to be at least this much, and I've got to be able to pay it this day, and I got to do this, that, and I'm getting so stiff that it's more about ritual, and it's more about just hitting the nail on the head than it is with me coming with joy and doing what I can with what I have. And so, like I said, I don't know why, but it's just like, man, this past week it's just been working my brain. I'm just really stressing out about not being able to pay as much lately, and I'm just really beating myself up. And that's so religious. That's so not the relationship concept that we have now through Jesus Christ. It's just so out of it. And it's just like I've had this inner conflict inside of me about this. And it's like God has been really just shaking me and waking me up and using this situation that I'm in to get me to see how I've been for a while now and how different I am when it comes to tithes and money than how I once was. How on fire I was about it at first compared to how I am now. And I'm like, okay, I get it now. And the thing about it, and this is what I want you to get out of what it is that I'm explaining to you right now. The thing about it is this. I've gotten stressed out about that, but I also let other things stress me out. And when you're stressed out about one thing and then you're stressed out about something else, other things that'll stress you out will make you even more stressed about the things that you're really not supposed to be stressed about at the start. So just to help you understand what I mean, this is what it's been like these past couple of weeks. So here's the thing, only, paying $500 but having to pay it off in chunks. And so, like I said, it's just a used car. And of course, you can't expect perfection with it being used. And the main issues with it was stuff with the door handles or the door locks. And so basically, the locks weren't working. So I'd have to keep the doors unlocked, right? And I'm thinking, well, before I start driving this car to places, I want to make sure that I can be able to lock and unlock these doors, because sure, I can lock them, I can open the door up and lock the door from the inside and shut them, but I've got to be able to take the key and unlock the doors, right? Otherwise, I can't get in. I have to make these locks work. And so what I ended up doing was I went on YouTube, of course, and I went and looked up the make and model and year of my car, and I'm trying to find videos on how to fix these particular issues and seeing if it's something that I can do. And my awesome roommate, he has a whole bunch of tools. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can use these tools. I can figure something out. And so I start working on the passenger side because I had to wait on the door handle for the driver's side to come in because I ordered it online. So I'm like, well, I'll just start on the passenger side for now. All I need to do is fix that lock. And then when that door handle comes in, I can do the lock and the door handle on the driver's side. So I'm like, okay. So I look up these videos and I'm like, okay, I can do this. So I unscrew all the screws to get the inside door panel off the door, right? So I'm trying to understand the issue with taking off the lock and the door handle, and it's kind of confusing me from what I can see on the video because you really can't see much. So that kind of helped me off another day. I'm like, man, I'm out there in the heat. I'm already, stressing out about other stuff. So I'm like, I'll just come to this another day. So another day comes, I figure out what I need to do. And so I take the lock because I had seen another video on how to fix the lock. And so I'm messing around with the lock, getting the lock fixed. So then another next day comes, and I'm out there, and so I'm trying to figure out how to, go backwards basically and put the lock back on the door handle, and then have it connected to the door itself, and that way I can put the door panel back on and screw it all. So what ends up happening is I did something wrong when it came to putting the lock back together, the back part of it, and this little thing, this itty bitty tiny piece of metal called an E-clip, pops off and goes down inside the door in some little compartment that I can't see. I can't see it. There's no way I'm going to find it. So I'm thinking, and I can't make it work without this little thing. It's something so small but so critical to hold this whole lock together. Because without it, you can put that key in and turn it, and all that stuff is just going to pop and go all over the place. Springs are going to go everywhere. So I'm like, okay. So I'm trying to see if we got them at my job, and then I'm going to other places trying to find what I need. So I'm over at Ace Hardware. I find these E-clips, and so I'm like, okay. So then this other day comes, and so I put the clip on the back of this lock, and I'm like, okay. So I get out there to the car and trying to screw that to the door handle, and screwing the door handle itself back to the car. And in the process, with my wibbly wobbly, not so steady hands, and of course my real sweaty hands, being out there in the heat, my hands and feet get real sweaty. So here I am trying to, get the tools in there to get the screws up in there, and there's this one screw or two of them that you kind of have to look through this hole and use a little, Allen wrench thing or whatever to try to screw it all in there. And these screws are just falling all out of my hands. They're falling all out of place, and some of them just went down in that main little part where you can just pick it up. But some of them that were kind of off in this one area, they fell down in this little compartment that at first I couldn't see. I didn't know where the screws were going. So I'm just thinking, well, it's just a lost screw, whatever. And so then I was losing them back to back. And so then another day comes, and I go and buy different size screws. And I'm like, okay, I can figure this out. Well, then I got screws that were just a little bit too small. Then I go and get some screws, and they're a little bit too big. So then finally I get the right size screws. So this next day comes, and I'm like, all right, I got this. Start putting these screws on, right? I'm thinking, oh man, okay, I'm going to have some success. But then when I'm thinking, okay, my work is about complete, let me test this out before I start trying to put the door panel back on to make sure this is all going to work, right? So I'm on the outside, and I shut the door, and I put the key in to see if I can, lock and unlock the door. Now, here's the thing. When you do what I had been doing, which was locking and unlocking the door from the inside, if you lock the door, you're locking just that door, right? Well, something that I totally, completely forgot about, because of course this is my new car, I'm not thinking nothing about it. What totally slipped my mind is the fact that when you lock the door from the outside with a key in the lock, you're not going to just lock that door, you're going to lock all the doors of the car, right? So that has totally slipped my mind. So the doors, all the other doors are shut. I'm thinking, okay, there's some other doors unlocked, so when I test this out, if something goes wrong, I can just get in through another door. So the doors are closed, some of them are unlocked. I stick the key in, I turn it, and it locks. And I'm like, yes. I try to turn it the opposite way, but it doesn't budge. But I knew when I fixed the lock, it could turn both ways, and I'm thinking, well, what's the deal here? So I kept moving it around, and I could make it lock, make it do that lock sound, but it didn't do the unlock. So I'm like, okay, let me try to figure out what's wrong. So I step over to the back door, behind the passenger door, and I pull on it, and it doesn't open. And I'm like, wait, what? It should be unlocked. And so I look in the windows, and I see all the other locks are locked, and I'm just like, crap. I felt like a huge idiot. Didn't even realize I was locking myself out of my own car. So there's that. Then to top it off, it was right before somebody was coming to pick me up for church. So I'm like, okay. So I had to call the police, but I'm thinking, well, I can't call anybody I know to come help me, and I can't call the police because I left my phone sitting in the car right along with the laptop that I was using to watch the videos to do the step-by-step process to make sure I'm doing all this crap right. So I go across the street and meet neighbors across the street that I hadn't met before. I had seen them, hadn't met them. So I meet this woman, I knock on the door, I'm talking to her, I'm just like, hey, I know I'm just a stranger from across the street, but if you don't mind, it would help me greatly if you would just let me borrow your phone. I got to call the police. I just accidentally locked myself out of my first car. It's just a mess, And, but anyway, we kind of chatted for a bit, and it was nice to just kind of meet her. And so the police come, and they slam Jim it open, blah, blah, blah. So then another day comes that I can mess around and try to figure out what the deal is. Well, come to find out, all those screws that I kept losing were going down into this little compartment that there's a rod that comes up in and out of it when you try to lock and unlock the door. So it can come upward to unlock, but it's not going to go down to unlock it because there are screws down in there jamming it up, keeping it from going all the way down. So I'm like doing all these twists to try to see inside, and I know it probably isn't making sense, but if you see the inside of a car door, it's not just like one huge gap. It's like these metal bars and everything else in the way, and you kind of have to maneuver your hands around to try to get in there. So you can barely see the compartment. You can see it, but you can't really look down in it that good. But I can see through the plastic where the screws were because I'm seeing some of the heads of the screws. So I'm maneuvering myself around and taking my index finger because that's all I had room for, and I'm trying to scratch them out. Then I found this little sharp tool to try to scrape them out. So I started scraping them out bit by bit, trying to get them out of there. And I kept testing it out thinking, okay, maybe if I get just enough of the screws out, it's going to work. Well, one minute, unlocking it and locking it from the inside would work, but unlocking it and locking it from the outside with the key wouldn't work. But then when I got the outside part to work, the inside part wouldn't work. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm just gonna have to get all these screws out to make this work. There's just no way around it. So I got like all the screws out except for like one, and I'm thinking, I can't get this last screw, and I was so frustrated. And I was cutting my fingers and hand all up, trying to dig in there and scraping myself up against all this metal. I'm like, man, I'm tired. I've been out here in this heat. I'm stressed out. I'm going in. So then, it was like one thing after another. And so I gotten a phone call from this prophet who has been ministering to me off and on here lately, and I'm very thankful that he's letting God speak the word through him. But he was talking to me, and he said, I'm seeing something that you've been working on, this project that you've been working on. You're working on it with your hands, and it's been frustrating you. And God is saying, don't let it frustrate you to the point where you quit working on it. Go back to working on it, because there's coming a day where he's going to give you favor with it to where it's going to work out. And it's all going to come together. So I'm like, okay. And at this point, a couple of days had went by that I really hadn't messed with the car very much. When before that I was working on it almost every day. So I'm like, okay, I go out there and I dig around. I get that one screw out that I couldn't get out. I'm like, okay, all right, God, all right, thank you, Jesus. I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna praise you out here in the car for just getting the screw out of a spot that's jamming everything up. So that happens. Like I said, it don't take much to please me. So then I'm like, okay. So I start with these new screws that I got, and instead of them fitting kind of strange, they all fit perfect. And I didn't drop the screws to where they were falling back down into the compartment again, so I didn't have that issue anymore. I got all the screws on pretty quick, and I'm like, okay, so these main screws in the door, they could get lost again. They're on. And so it just seemed like everything was just lining out perfectly. Put the inner door panel back on, putting the screws back on, like it was just perfectly coming together. And so then I was able to go ahead and get a little start on the other door while I'm waiting on other parts to come in for it. But it was just really nice to just have that smooth little day where it just seemed like it was doing what I needed it to do. And I'm like, okay, thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. I needed that. And so I was thankful for that help, thankful for that word. Man, it was wearing me out though. I was getting frustrated. But between that and stressing out about, oh my gosh, thinking God's gonna be so upset if I don't pay nearly as much on my tithes as what I was doing, just because I've been putting all this money into this car. And this is the thing that I believe God has really been showing me, and it's this. The car, like I've told y'all before, the thing about me getting the license, it was something that I thought would be important to do because, well, if I want to get married, I want to make sure I can drive my wife wherever she wants to go. I don't want her to always have to drive me around. So I'm thinking, okay, it will be good to do this. So in the process of me, getting the book that you have to study to take the written part of the test, in the process of that and getting ready to take the written and then getting ready to take the driving part and this and that. In the process of that, this woman that I know that's very much in the prophetic, the same woman who gave me that word from God about my health, eating better, and man, that's helped me out a lot. As a matter of fact, let me say this. I think I mentioned in a sermon that I had gotten up to like a 34 in men's, and I had been there for quite some time, but then when I started eating better and taking the advice of what this woman was telling me, it was just like all of a sudden just the weight just started just plummeting. It seemed like after a couple of weeks or so of just not even really exercising like I once was doing, but just eating a little bit better, just thinking it's just good for my health, not even thinking about losing weight, I had dropped back down to a 32, which was my original size. Now, those pants and shorts in the 32s, they fit. They were a little tight, but they fit. Well, I don't know if you can really tell, but these are 32s, and now they're not tight anymore. They're getting just a little bit loose on me. In other words, I'm still losing weight. Not that I'm trying to. I'm just doing better with my eating habits, just being healthier. And I feel healthier. I felt better. I feel lighter. It's been good. It's been a blessing. I can see a lot of differences in myself and a lot of things. But anyway, but anyway, the same woman that gave me the advice from God about eating better and everything, she had even said, the thing that God is showing me is that when you do get your license and then you get your car, sometime after that there's a blessing that's going to come, but you've got to do that first. So I'm like, okay. So after hearing that, I'm thinking, well, let me go ahead, continue this process to get my license, and then let me find the best deal on a car that I can. Because before that, I'm thinking, well, I'll just save up over time, maybe get a new car, maybe, get a used one that, is at such and such price. But after I heard that, I was like, uh-oh, blessings coming. Okay, let me hurry up. Let me get this car. Let me just get what I can. It's going to work. And so, I did what I was supposed to do. I got the license, got the car. And I've even been told of some things that are fixing to get ready to happen. And I've been told when, but I'm not sharing all that right now. But in the meantime of the waiting process, or being in that hallway, as we like to put it, before the open door, in the process of just waiting and preparing and working on the car and doing this and doing that, here recently it's like God just slammed something on me, and when He revealed it to me, it blew my mind, because He was basically using something that I had just preached on earlier this week to help get the point across about how me stressing about not paying enough in my eyes on my tithes is just ridiculous. And so that's what I want to look at real quick. Let's see here. Go with me to 1 Samuel, and I'm going to show you this. 1 Samuel chapter 15. Verse 22, it says, "And Samuel said, Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams." If you remember in the last sermon I did, I read that verse, but I read more, around it, before it and after it or whatever. But basically what was being talked about in this particular chapter was you had King Saul. And he was over the people of God, and God was telling him, okay, y'all, I'm going to send y'all into this battle. You're going to have the victory. I want you to utterly destroy the Amalekites and these folks, these wicked, evil, rebellious folks. But I don't want you to just destroy them. I want you to utterly destroy them. In other words, I want you to take them out, and I want you to destroy all that belongs to them. And I don't want you to bring any of it back into your camp as spoil. Just do away with it all. Don't take none of their stuff back home with you. And so they went out into the battle, and they did destroy those people, but they didn't destroy all their things. In fact, they did the opposite of what God said. They went on ahead and took some of their animals and this and that, and they took those animals and had the burnt offerings, the sacrifices unto God. And so when Samuel comes to confront Saul about this issue, and Saul talks to him, and he's like, well, we did what God said. We destroyed those people, but those people, they really wanted to take some of the stuff back with them, and I was scared of the opinions of the people. I was too scared to say no to them, so I let them do it, even though that's not what God wanted, blah, blah, blah. And Samuel went on to explain to him, you missed the big picture. See, you think it's okay that they went on ahead and took stuff that belonged to those people, even though God said not to, and they think it's okay because they took that stuff and burnt it and sacrificed it unto God. It was like they were saying, well, don't worry, God, we're doing what you said not to do, but here's the thing, we're gonna offer this up to you. So see, it's good, right? And Samuel's explaining, no, that's not right. That mindset isn't right. Because even though God does love these sacrifices, these burnt sacrifices, these meat offerings and these drink offerings that you do, what he loves more than your sacrifice is your obedience. And he would have loved more for you to simply obey what he said and not take that stuff than take it and make sacrifice. Obedience is greater than sacrifice. Obey him first and foremost. That's what's most important. So that's what I was explaining earlier in the week. And God took that same thing and he just slammed it on me. And he used what's going on with me right now to show me something. And basically what I think he was showing me was this. I've made this sacrifice of the tithes. It's a sacrifice. You're giving up something. You're giving to him. You're giving something that maybe you don't always want to give up. Sometimes people don't want to just give up money or whatever. But when you pay your tithes, you're making that offer, that sacrifice unto the Lord. But I was obedient in getting the license and getting the car. And if it wasn't something that God was really dead set on me doing, I'd probably not be having a car right now. I'm making these movements, I'm making these steps forward in obedience to God, in obedience of doing what he said for me to do for a blessing that's coming. I'm being obedient. I'm doing some things that I may not want to spend time doing. I'm spending a little time on this project, on this car, and sometimes it's fun, and sometimes it frustrates me and it gets annoying. But I'm spending the time and effort and finances on this vehicle because it's what I needed to do. So I am being obedient. And through me being obedient, I've had to put a lot of this money in to where I don't have nearly as much as I would to be able to tithe or to sacrifice as much. And I'm beating myself up over not being able to sacrifice that much. But obedience is greater than the sacrifice. So the fact that I went and spent all this time and finances for the car, it doesn't matter that I won't be able to pay as much on the sacrifice or the tithes, because the main thing that God said for me to do, to be obedient, I've done. And that's just it. I spent way more money, way more, hundreds more, being obedient than I would have on the sacrifice of tithes. So I'm actually putting way more sacrifice in, really, because of the obedience. So why am I flipping out about not being able to put as much in tithes when I put way more in to be obedient, which was greater than the sacrifice? Get it? So when that hit me, it blew my mind. And I was just sitting there thinking, why in the world am I letting this stress me out? And then I really got to thinking, and I'm like, I've been a little religious with this. And then I got to thinking more, and I'm like, I'm not as on fire and happy and as excited about paying the tithes as I used to be. Not that I'm mad about it, not that I don't want to do it. I'm just not as happy about it anymore. Now I'm like stressful and upset at myself and beating myself up and thinking God isn't going to be as satisfied with this offering. And the whole time he's up there just grinning and smiling because I've overcome fear and I've went and got this license and I got the permit, got the license, got the car, spending time working on it, being determined to do all of what he said for me to do. He's up there just smiling and cheesing at his little kid. And here I am moping and frustrated and just, man. And the whole time I'm thinking he's just not going to be as pleased. He's just as pleased as he can be. But it took that to hit me for me to wake up and realize it. I got it made. But I just didn't see it that way. But God had to just wake me up and get me to see the big picture. It was just going over my head and my mohawk at the same time. It was just going over my head. And then when it hit me, I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I so about it? Why am I whiny about this? It's all good. Like, it's good in the hood. It's good in the neighborhood. It's all right. It's not a big deal. God is very pleased. He's not just pleased, he's very pleased right now. So why am I feeling this way? And then I just got some joy in me once I realized that God loves me and he cares about me, and he's not upset with me. How can he be upset? That's like if I got 5 special bananas every week. I know this is random, but just go with me on it. 5 special delicious bananas every week. And God says, hey, Kobe, you can keep 2 of those bananas. You do whatever you want with them. But give me 3 of those bananas every week. Okay, God. But then suddenly one week, God comes up and he's just like, you know what? I'm going to need you to take 3 bananas and I want you to give it to that person over there for a particular reason. Because they're going to need those bananas. So give 3 to that person. And I'm like, okay, God. Well, then when it's his time for that week to come get his 3 bananas, and I'm just like, well, I only have 2. And then God gets mad and gets angry and says, well, why don't you have my 3 bananas? And I'm like, well, God, I only get 5 and you told me to give 3 away, so I only have 2 to give to you. I don't know what else to do. Right? That's similar to how it's playing out in my mind. I know that's a strange way to put it, but you get my point. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. And think about how silly it is that I was thinking about it that way. Of course God's not going to be mad that I won't have the 3 bananas to give to him this go around. So what? I gave up the 3, not just spending 3 bananas on whatever I want to spend it on. I got rid of those 3 out of obedience to him. So if he wanted me to give up 3 bananas, obviously he's not going to be mad if later all I can give him is 2 instead of 3. Right? It's common sense. So of course he's not mad. So why am I pouting? I just had to wake up and realize it. And I'm like, oh wow, what have I been thinking? But anyway, I'm getting ready to wrap this up. Just a couple of quick spots to go to. Let's see here. Go with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 9. We know this verse. It says this, every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. We know that God wants someone who will give cheerfully. And as I've explained before in a past sermon, cheerful here is from a Greek word, hilaros. It means things like cheerful, joyous, merry, willing, prompt to do anything, and hilarious. The word that's least mentioned when talking about what this word means, hilarious. And the funny, get it, hilarious, funny. The funny thing about the fact that it means hilarious is, well, like I said, the Greek word is hilaros, which sounds like our English word hilarious. Like you can tell that it means hilarious, because that's what it even sounds like. So not only is he saying, I want a cheerful giver, a joyous giver, someone who's happy and willing and prompt to give. I want a hilarious giver, a funny giver. I want somebody with some funny money. Now you understand the title of this message. It's like God saying, I want somebody who has such a joy in them when they give that they're not thinking, okay, I have to give this set amount. I always have to give this set percentage or more. And if I just don't meet that standard, God's just going to be upset. He's going to feel like I stole from him because I couldn't give as much. Da, 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 da. You know, no. He wants someone who wants to give, but who is also happy about giving. Even if they can't give as much, or even if all they have left is nowhere near what they usually would pay, he's just excited that you're still willing to do something, that you're still willing to do your part, and that you're happy about it, and that you're not mad or sad or angry about it or being begrudging about it. He wants you to be able to laugh about it. And here's the thing that I thought of when getting ready for this sermon. It's kind of like that saying, laughing all the way to the bank. You've heard that expression, you're going to laugh all the way to the bank. Well, if you got folks who can laugh all the way to the bank, when was the last time we as Christians laughed all the way up to the front of the church to put our tithes in the, oh my goodness. When was the last time you were happy and grinning and laughing and acting like you're picking daisies and skipping through daisies on your way to go put some money in the tithing bucket or in the tithing plate? When did you just walk in the church laughing and giggling? Not because you were excited to see another human being or because somebody made you laugh. When were you just happy and just giggling and just being all silly because you're happy to be in the house of God and you're happy to worship Him and you're happy to not only worship Him with your hands and with your voice, but with your tithes? When was the last time you were happy about that to the point where it kind of made you laugh? You can laugh all the way to the bank to get money or to put money in for it to add up over time. But when was the last time you were happy and hilarious about sacrificing? Think about that. That's what he's looking for, is that cheerful, hilarious giver. And so finally, the very last spot I'm going to take you to, and I'll wrap it up, is Mark chapter 12, starting at verse 41. It says, and Jesus sat over against the treasury and beheld how the people cast money into the treasury. And many that were rich cast in much. And there came a certain poor widow, and she threw in 2 mites, which make a farthing. And he called unto him his disciples, and said unto them, verily I say unto you, that this poor widow hath cast more in than all they which have cast into the treasury. For all they did cast in of their abundance, but she of her want did cast in all that she had, even all her living. So here's Jesus. He's seeing people come up and pay their dues, pay their money. And these guys, these rich guys, are just throwing in money, just casting it. In other words, not just throwing it, but throwing it without a care. Throwing it without worrying about if it's going to land in the right spot. They can just toss it because they've got so much money that whatever tithing they pay is probably just chump change to them. It's just something that's just dispensable, something that's just pocket change. But then here comes this poor widow woman. She's not up there trying to make a show of herself, trying to get attention. She goes up there and she puts in the last little bit of money that she has. And from our human eyes, it would look as though she didn't tithe nearly as much as what some of the other people could have put in. But Jesus speaks up and says, you know, if you think about it, this woman actually put in more than anybody else, because she put in all that she could put in. To you, it seems like these rich folks put in more, but you got to think, what they put in to them wasn't much. It was just that chump change. But for this woman who doesn't have much, for her to put in all that she has, for her, that's everything. That's her living, her life savings. So I look at it as she put in the most. But I don't think it was just about amount. I think it was about something else that really made Jesus say she really put in the most. I believe it was her heart behind it. And you may say, well, it doesn't really say much about, their heart or, anything like that. Where do you get that from? Well, this is what I mean. If these guys were so rich, of course they should pay their tithes. They got the money for it. They got more than enough, right? But this woman, she actually would have a valid excuse for not being able to give up some money. She could say, I'm poor, I'm a widow, and this little bit here is all that I have. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. But even though she could have not given up that money at all, and also if you notice, it doesn't say that she walked up begrudgingly. It doesn't say she walked up mad or upset or with an attitude. It just says she went up there and put in the money. And so because she was willing to put whatever she could in, even though it wasn't much, and even though she did it right after those rich guys went up there and put something in, and so it could have been a little embarrassing and a little humiliating that she couldn't do as much as everybody else. But even though she couldn't put in as much, and even though she could have not put anything in, and even though she could have been mad about it, she just walks on up there, puts it in, and goes on or tries to go on about her business until Jesus stops her and says, you know what? She's got the right attitude. It was about her heart. Her heart was in the right place. She wasn't trying to compare or compete money amounts with anybody else or with herself, her past amounts that she's probably put in. She didn't try to compare and contrast and say, well, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be able to put in as much this time. She didn't do all that. She's put in what she had. She did all she knew to do. And in Jesus' eyes, that was enough. So for those that are trying to figure out this old covenant, new covenant thing, well, I'll just say this. There was a time when we probably did have to always have that set amount. Like I said, I know a lot of people will say about 10%. Whatever, I'm not here to argue that. The point is that now, yes, we should still give, but we should be cheerful givers that are not all bound by religion, by chains, by bondage, and walking around feeling like if we can't put in as much as we did last week, or if somebody else puts in more, God's just going to be so upset with us. The point is that we're trying. The point is that our heart's in the right place. The point is that we're doing the right thing. We're doing what we were told to do. Coming with our first fruits, with joy in our hearts. So I just want to wrap this up by saying, if you have a good time at that bank, making them withdrawals, if you would take the time to have that same joy and that same grin on your face and that same little chuckle of hilariousness when you deposit the money in your tithes, you might just see a difference in your finances. You can stand back, even while you're in that hallway, and get ready for doors to open, and you can look up and see the windows of heaven open up to pour you out a blessing just for you. You might not even have room enough to contain it all. I'm going to pray us out of here. Heavenly Father, I thank you for another time to minister another word. And Lord, I just pray that this message would just wake people up and get people refreshed when it comes to how they think about their money, how they think about their finances, how they look at their income, how they look at their paycheck, that they get it out of their mind that they have to compete with others or even themselves on how much they give, but that it's about the heart. It's about the intentions behind it. It's about coming with joy and not anger or bitterness or resentment when coming to do something that's going to actually expand your kingdom. Let your people be reminded that it's about growing the house of God, not because it's about a numbers game. It's not about competing with the church across the street for numbers or a bigger church, but simply because the more bigger the numbers are in the church, that actually means that there's more people going to heaven. And that's what it's about, is getting lost souls saved. Lord, I thank you. I give you the praise, glory, and honor, Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.